Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Progression to Analog. I'm your host, Caitlin Begg. In today's episode, I'm going to be speaking about how I decreased my screen time by over 65% since September of 2022, and why you should stop checking your phone when you first wake up. There are limited statistics as to exactly how many of us begin the day by checking our phones, but in April of 2013, CBS News cited a study that said that 80% of people grab their smartphone within 15 minutes of waking. Online, other statistics for this range from in the mid 70s to in the upper 80s. Dr. Bobby references this on her podcast, MindBodySpace. She's a mom MD specializing in stress management and resilience training and is on faculty at Juilliard, where she teaches the science of resilience for peak performance and happiness. In September 2023, I was featured on her podcast, MindBodySpace, speaking about how to decrease anxiety and get focused in a hyper-texting world. We spoke at length about my decision to begin each morning reading nonfiction before any cell phone or computer use. She did a follow-up mini episode after mine and explained some supporting evidence and neural mechanisms as to why this habit can be helpful for others, and actually started to initiate the practice in her own life after our conversation. One of the reasons why checking your phone when you first wake up is so harmful has to do with something called sleep inertia. In a 2018 study, Dr. Lynn Marie Trotty spoke about this. Quote, sleep inertia refers to the transitional state between sleep and wake, marked by impaired performance, reduced vigilance, and a desire to return to sleep. The intensity and duration of sleep inertia vary based on situational factors, but its effects may last minutes to several hours, unquote. Dr. Bobby took this a step further on her podcast following my episode and said, quote, this impaired performance and reduced vigilance creates a brain state that is more susceptible to being distracted and doom scrolling on social media or getting absorbed in a spiraling down of all the headlines around us, unquote. Relatedly, cell phone usage has been found to have negative effects on physical and mental well-being. And in a study on the National Institute of Health's website from 2022, the researchers found, quote, a significant association between excess use of cell phones and negative effects on physical and mental health well-being. Based on the results, it is recommended that more physical activities, an alternative to minimize cell phone usage, should be planned for the students. Public health policymakers and stakeholders need to address the ill effects of excessive use of cell phones through novel policies, especially young students, and alternatives to reduce their cell phone activities, unquote. Relatedly, Stanford professor and Huberman Lab podcast host Andrew Huberman said that, quote, this impaired performance and reduced vigilance creates a brain state that is more susceptible to being distracted and doom scrolling on social media or getting absorbed in a spiraling down of all the headlines around us, unquote, in reference to beginning your day checking your cell phone. So many of us understand that checking a cell phone is not the best thing to do in the morning. So why do we still do it, and what can we do about it? I'll start with a personal story here. When I think about why I would begin my mornings prior to 2022, with checking my phone, it honestly just had to do with the fact that my phone was close to my nightstand and that it was readily accessible when I first woke up. Today, I don't have my phone in the bedroom at all at night. I keep it in the kitchen and plugged in so that it's not accessible in the morning and it's not even a temptation. But this actually, for me, all happened by accident. On the 5th of September, 2022, I was in Maine and it was a rainy morning, and I woke up and my phone was across the room, presumably dead. I hadn't plugged it in the night before. And next to my nightstand was this book. If you, well, for those who are in video can see it. If not, it's The Society of the Spectacle by Guy Debord. I was trying to get back into reading. COVID had made me feel like I was in this endless loop of phone brain. My screen time was really high, and Society of the Spectacle is a dense piece of critical theory that speaks a lot about the alienation of everyday life under capitalism. And I guess I thought that the best way to get back into reading after COVID and phone brain was to brute force it a little bit. And it had taken me several months to get halfway through the book. I carried it with me everywhere, no matter where I went, to try to get a little passage in here and there. But something in me that morning on the 5th of September, 2022 changed. And I read the final 50% of the book in just a few hours. And I realized after I had read it that something in my brain felt different. And throughout the day, I felt happier, lighter, and more myself. And I'd realized that this was because I didn't begin my morning on my phone. In my true Team Extreme way, since that morning, the 5th of September, 2022, I've begun each morning reading nonfiction before any cell phone or computer use. This looks different on each morning. Some mornings, if I have an early flight or a lot of early work, it might just be a page or two. Other times, I'm allowing myself to get lost in the reading and I spend a couple hours. It really varies, but that habit has anchored me and helped a lot with my morning habit. As a result of this, my screen time has decreased by over 65%, and I can say that my happiness and sense of presence and sense of self has really increased as well. Now, this isn't all in my head either. A 2022 South Korean study looked at using wake-up tasks for morning behavior change in a development and usability study. And in this study, they looked at the effectiveness of wake-up tasks in accomplishing the target morning behavior and looked at key factors for morning behavior change, such as waking up on time, escaping from sleep inertia, the item we mentioned earlier, and quickly starting the desired target behavior. Dr. Juna Bobby referenced this study on her podcast, and it was really interesting, so I took a look at the study as well. So if we think about, instead of checking our phone, the target behavior in my case is reading. And so that target behavior has helped with a lot of downstream items, and that is reinforced by the data from this 2022 South Korean study. In the morning, it doesn't have to be reading nonfiction. I know for some of you that may be listening, you may think that sounds insane. I don't want to do that. And that's fine. But think about what target behavior you might want to begin your morning with. That could be anything from doing 10 squats or doing 10 jumping jacks or meditating or even just making breakfast and looking out the window and being present. Anything that's direct, unmediated experience. That's what's important in beginning your day. Now, I liken beginning your day with phone use to beginning your day with taking 15 tequila shots. It's just too much for your brain to handle. It overwhelms you, it slows you down, and it doesn't allow you to go through the day with intentionality and with presence and with happiness for what's ahead. Now, I will caveat this with the phone is a necessary part of everyday life, and I am not someone who goes along with the discourse that's popular saying that we should get rid of our phones or we should have complete phone detoxes, although I have done 81 plus hours in New York City without a phone myself. I really believe that it is all about balance, but the balance has been put too much on the consumer without the proper tools or knowledge to do so. One of the simple things I like to think about is whenever you're with either yourself or with someone else that you want to be spending time with, that's your little world. You are present in that moment, and that's where you are, and that's where you're spending time. As soon as you pick up your phone, you're bringing yourself out of that little world into a huge world filled with noise, filled with clutter, filled with hypercommunication or excess inbound or outbound communication, often precipitated by technology, a term that I speak about often that was coined by French sociologist Jean Baudrillard. That's what you're choosing to do every time you pick up your phone. Now, again, a phone is a necessary part of everyday life, but we have to have some balance here. In August 2018, a study was published in the journal Computers and Human Behavior titled Sleeping with the Frenemy, How Restricting Bedroom Use of Smartphones Impacts Happiness and Wellbeing. Some of the highlights of this study included that not using smartphones in the bedroom increases happiness and quality of life. Risk of smartphone addiction decreases when smartphones are left outside the bedroom. Going to bed without smartphones in the room improves quality of sleep. Sleeping without smartphones improves sleep, relationships, focus, and well-being, and 93.6% of participants might or would consider not sleeping with their phone again. But as I discovered on that morning, the 5th of September, 2022, a lot of it does have to do with the simple guardrails we put in place in our everyday life to change our behavior. One example of this in practice is the mornings where I work out at Equinox, my gym. It's a little bit further from my apartment, and instead of beginning my day with reading and then immediately when I leave the apartment going on my phone, I choose to spend the morning not at all on my phone. And the first time that I go on my phone actually will be to use my phone as a key fob to check in to Equinox. One way to segment phone use is to use the phone for the intended purpose each time you pick it up, instead of letting it draw you into an endless funnel. So here's what I mean by this. If I'm on the subway, I'm reading on the way there. I'm not on my phone. I'm not texting people. I'm just present. If I'm walking, I'm just present. Once I get there, as I approach the gym, I go onto my phone, but I only go onto the Equinox app. I click check in, and then I show my barcode. I go into the locker room. I come out, and once I start my workout, I go to put my music on for the workout. And that's it. I'm not checking my text in the morning. I'm not checking my email in the morning. I'm using the phone like it's an iPod and like it's a key fob for the gym. That means that when I come out of my workout, I'm feeling really refreshed and like I was fully present in that activity and not feeling even more overwhelmed because I decided to check my email in between lifting sets or decided to text back all the time. Now, again, this is a habit and practice that can be used with balance or however it might fit into your everyday life. But I know that being more intentional with our phone use has extremely positive effects on everyday life. If you're not convinced by the mental health aspect or the feeling more present or happier in your everyday life, there is also data to support the fact that more intentional phone use has effects on work behavior and work productivity. One such study from 2014 in Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes examined the effects of smartphone use for work late at night on next day behavior. And across 2 experience sampling studies, smartphone use reduced daily work engagement via sleep and depletion. And the effects of smartphone use were unique from those of other technology use. Beginning your day by checking your phone also sets you up to be more readily accepting of daily interruptions, and this can have significant effects. In one of my conference papers from last year titled Everyday Conversation, the Effect of Asynchronous Communication and Hypercommunication on Daily Interaction and Socio-Technical Systems. As it pertains to phone use, in this paper, I looked at projects in what I deemed progression to analog, which is actually where I came up with the name for this podcast, titled Table 3.1, Projects in Progression to Analog. And on one side, I had technologically driven every day, and on the other side, I had progression to analog. So here are some tips for anyone listening who may want to impact their smartphone use, but they're not sure where to start. So first on the left was technologically driven every day, begin day by checking phone. The progression to analog version of that is begin day by reading, even if only a page, stretching, meditating, or anything that doesn't involve a screen. Constantly checking phone prompted by buzzes of notifications. Instead, be more intention driven and leverage do not disturb. Instead of incessant texting or hypercommunication, leverage asynchronous digital communication or communication through digital means that exists outside of a steady stream like iMessage or text messages as an exchange of information and synchronous dialogue, so dialogue that exists in a steady stream, whenever possible for ideation, creation, or connection. Instead of snapping unlimited photos on your phone, be more selective about digital photography or maybe shoot film. Instead of buying fast fashion, take care and inventory of current items, purchase thrifted or used clothes whenever possible, and when purchasing new clothes, ensure intention and thought. And for the last one, in a technologically driven everyday, runs, walks, all monitored through smartwatches, tethered to phone and headphones throughout. And the progression to analog version is interspersing technologically mediated walks with derives, literally drifting, emphasizing direct interaction with the surrounding environment. During a derive, quote, one or more persons during a certain period drop their relations, their work and leisure activities, and all their other usual motives for movement and action, and let themselves be drawn by the attractions of the terrain and the encounters they find there. Guy Debord, 1981. From a socio-philosophical perspective, the cybernetic imagination presumed a, quote, collective intelligence would result from, quote, progress in telecommunications and information technology. Instead, it's created an ever-present smog, a pollution of dialogue, cooperative mechanisms, and the like by relying on machines and regarding man as, quote, the weak link of the man-machine interface, unquote. This reliance forces us to submit to troves of data, to quote information to make every decision in daily life, like humankind can and thereby should be programmed. Just because there's an app that says it's going to fix our life, or there's a book that has an app version that you can read, or there's 70 different text messages that you could answer, or lots of different emails that you could answer this second, doesn't mean that we have to do it right this second. It really affects our ability to complete longer tasks, to be present in everyday life, and to really find meaning in what we're doing. This emphasis on direct, unmediated experience is the most important part of what I've said today. It might seem impossible to move away from this speed and velocity, especially given the influence capitalism has on our everyday life and on phones and on consumption. I want to close this episode with a quote from the greatest of all German writers, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, born 1749, passed away 1832, often regarded as the last true Renaissance man. In this book that I'm currently reading, he, quote, seldom hesitated to jot down his thoughts on any scraps of paper that came to hand in brief personal notes that reveal his deepest reflections on art, ethics, literature, and natural science, unquote. There's 1,413 maximum reflections of Goethe's, and one that has stood out to me so far. This is from 1829, and it's in the category of thoughts about arts, ethics, and nature in the spirit of travelers. Quote, the greatest evil of our time, which lets nothing come to fruition, is, I think, that one moment consumes the next, wastes the day within that same day, and so is always living from hand to mouth without achieving anything of substance. Don't we already have news sheets for every point of the day? A clever man might well be able to slip in one or two more. In this way, everything that anyone does, is working at or writing, indeed plans to write, is dragged out into the open. No one is allowed to be happy or miserable except as a pastime for the rest of the world. And so news rushes from house to house, from town to town, from one country to another, and in the end, from one continent to the next, and all on the principle of speed and velocity. It seems as if this speed and velocity in everyday life is a constant, even from 1829 until now. The only difference here is algorithmic-based technologies. The constant here is capitalism. What we can do to move against this speed and velocity is engage in direct and unmediated experience, take control of our everyday technology habits to make sure that they fit our lives and they don't fit that of others. They don't fit that of big tech. They fit that of you, of your loved ones, of your social circle, and of your work. One of the biggest things that this practice of beginning each day with reading nonfiction before any cell phone or computer use has brought me is reduced anxiety from digital communication. I remember a time in college and post-grad when text messages and the like would stress me out, when I would send responses to messages without thinking about it. And it's not to say that digital communication never stresses me out anymore. Of course, those stresses are there, but I have such a stronger toolkit to manage them from these daily habits and practices. And honestly, it reminds me of that childlike joy and freedom of the everyday that I had as someone born in the mid 90s before algorithmic based technologies, that joy of just experiencing the world around me. If you're interested in more information on this, I will link some of the studies in the description. You can also listen to Dr. Juna Bobby's MindBodySpace episode on this, which is from the 8th of September 2023, and my episode was from the 1st of September 2023. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back again next Wednesday.